Welcome to the Heartbreak Chronicles, where every story is a raw reflection of life. Hit that subscribe button to stay tuned, give us a like to show your support, and share this episode with your friends. Don't forget to leave a comment and let us know what you think. Now, let's dive into today's story. In Columbus, Ohio, Mark Thompson's life seemed perfect. He and his wife, Emily, have been married for nearly 20 years and have a 15-year-old daughter, Sarah. Mark is a senior creative director at an advertising agency and Emily is a middle school teacher. They live in a cozy suburban house with a close group of friends and family. On the surface, this is a happy family. However, on the eve of their 20th wedding anniversary, Mark's world began to fall apart. It all started with an argument between him and Sarah. That night, Sarah left the table in a foul mood, leaving a mess behind. Mark called out to her, "Sarah, come back and clean up your stuff." Sarah replied impatiently, "Later." Mark insisted, "Pack up now. You're a member of this family and you have to follow the rules." Sarah bursts out, "Why should I listen to you? Are you really my father?" The words hit Mark like a hammer to the heart. He was frozen in place, too shocked to speak. Sarah also seemed to realize that she had said the wrong thing and hastily apologized. "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to say that. I'll pack it up." She quickly cleared the table with her head down, then ran out of the room without a word, leaving Mark alone in deep confusion and disbelief. This sudden questioning planted a seed of doubt in Mark's mind. Why would Sarah say such a thing? Mark began to think back over the details of the past, trying to find clues. Sarah does look a little different from Mark and Emily. She prefers to read and learn, and is more introverted than her parents. Mark had discussed with Emily why Sarah was so different from them, but Emily always said he was overthinking it. Now Mark couldn't help but begin to wonder if Emily was hiding something. Over the next few days, Mark watched Sarah and Emily's interactions, hoping to discover something. But it was business as usual. Sarah seemed to have forgotten all about that day, and Emily was as gentle and considerate as ever. This, in turn, made Mark even more confused and upset. Finally, Mark decided to take action. He secretly collected a sample of Sarah's hair and sent it along with his own for a paternity test. Waiting for the results was a daily ordeal for Mark. When the results finally arrived in Mark's office, his hands were shaking. He took a deep breath and opened the envelope. He was relieved when he saw the results. Sarah was indeed his biological daughter. However, Mark's sense of relief was soon replaced by new doubts. If Sarah is his daughter, why would she say something like that? Are there other secrets hidden in this family? With these questions in mind, Mark decides to have a heart-to-heart with Sarah. He chose a night when Emily was working late and knocked gently on Sarah's door. "Sarah, can we talk?" Mark asked carefully. Sarah nodded and put down the book she was holding. Mark sat on the edge of her bed and spoke with deliberation. "About what you said the other night. Do you know something?" A flicker of hesitation flashed in Sarah's eyes. Then she whispered, I've heard some rumors." Mark held his breath, waiting for what was to come. Sarah continued, "Someone said that there's some dysfunction between Mom and Uncle Jason. Uncle Jason is Mark's brother, 2 years younger than Mark. He's single, and he's a frequent visitor to Mark's house." Mark had never suspected that there was something between Jason and Emily, but now the thought haunted him like a viper. Mark held back his inner shock and reassured Sarah, "Don't worry, baby. I assure you, you are definitely my daughter. As for the rest, I'll take care of it, okay?" Sarah nodded and gave Mark a hug. Mark left Sarah's room with his mind reeling. How was he supposed to deal with this possible truth? Who should he trust? Over the next few days, Mark began to pay close attention to the interactions between Emily and Jason. He noticed the twinkle in Emily's eyes when she mentioned Jason, the imperceptible hint of tenderness in the way Jason looked at Emily. These tiny details are like countless knives, cutting into Mark's heart little by little. Mark knew that he had to find the truth. But little does he know that the truth may be even harsher than he imagined, and will completely upend the perfect marriage he has always cherished. As seeds of suspicion take root in Mark's mind, he decides to dig deeper into the relationship between Emily and Jason. He began to notice details that he had previously overlooked. Emily often worked late on Tuesday afternoons, which happened to be Jason's regular weekly day off. Emily's cell phone was always carefully locked, and Jason seemed to look at Sarah with an indescribable guilt in his eyes. Mark struggled to control himself from making light of the situation. He knew that if he confronted them hastily, he might lose his chance to get the truth. He decides to take a more discreet approach and begins secretly documenting Emily's whereabouts, even considering hiring a private investigator. However, fate seems determined to speed up this process of coming to the truth. One Tuesday afternoon, Mark returned home early due to a sudden migraine. As he opened the door to his home, he heard an unusual noise coming from the second-floor bedroom. His heart raced and his palms sweated as he slowly walked up the stairs. The bedroom door was ajar, and Mark took a deep breath and pushed it open. The sight in front of him made him drop like a stone. Emily and Jason were entwined, so engrossed in each other's caresses that they didn't even notice his presence. Mark felt a wave of dizziness and had to hold onto the doorframe to stay on his feet. Emily spotted him first and screamed, quickly pulling the sheet up to cover her body. Jason, on the other hand, jumped out of bed like a frightened rabbit and scrambled to get dressed. "Mark, I can explain," Emily choked out, tears already welling up in her eyes. Mark just felt a surge of anger rise from his chest and rush to his brain. He turned violently, rushed down the stairs and out of the house, ignoring the cries of Emily and Jason behind him. He drove around the city in aimless circles, trying to clear his mind, but his mind kept replaying the images he had just seen. After a few hours, Mark finally calmed down and returned home. Emily sat alone on the couch in the living room, her eyes red from crying. "Jason has left." Mark sat across from Emily and asked in a husky voice, "How long has it been?" Emily lowered her head and replied softly, 5 years. 5 years. That number hit Mark like a punch in the chest. Their marriage lasted nearly 20 years, and for a quarter of that time, Emily cheated on him. Why? Mark asked the question with difficulty. Emily looked up, pain and guilt in her eyes. I wanted a son. After Sarah was born, we were never able to get pregnant again. I thought the problem was you. So? Mark felt a wave of nausea. He thought back to the years after Sarah's birth, their efforts to have a second child, the pressure exerted by Emily's mother, and that longing look in Emily's eyes. But he never thought Emily would fulfill her desire for a son in this way. What about Sarah? Mark asked shakily. Is she? Sarah is your daughter, Emily said hastily. I swear, Mark. Sarah is 100% your child. Mark closed his eyes and felt a faint twinge of relief. At least that's true. But immediately afterward, another terrible thought struck him. You and Jason did. Emily lowered her head and nodded painfully. There is one, a boy. We gave him to a distant relative of Jason's to raise. Mark felt the world crumble beneath him. Not only has his wife betrayed him, but his brother is involved, and there's even a child he's never met. The secret was corroding the foundations of their family like poison. Over the next few days, Mark was in deep pain and confusion. He doesn't know how to face Emily, how to face Sarah, or even how to face himself. He took a long vacation, locked himself in his house all day, and refused to communicate with anyone. Emily tries to talk to him, explaining her motives and asking for forgiveness, but Mark is just silent. He can't forgive Emily's betrayal, much less accept Jason's. Not only did the two of them deceive him, they got innocent Sarah involved. Meanwhile, Sarah seems to sense an unusual atmosphere in her home. She became more reticent and often looked at Mark and Emily with worried eyes. Mark knew they would have to explain it all to Sarah sooner or later, but he wasn't ready to face the difficult conversation. Just as Mark is sinking into the depths of despair, he receives an unexpected phone call. It's Alex, a college friend he hasn't talked to in years. Alex hears something unusual in Mark's voice and insists on coming to visit him. Mark was going to say no, but eventually agreed. Alex's arrival gives Mark a glimmer of hope. They spent the entire evening talking at length, and Mark poured out all his pain and confusion to this old friend. Alex listened patiently and then gave his advice. Mark, I know you're hurting right now, but you can't just give up, Alex said seriously. Think about Sarah. She needs you. No matter what happens, you'll always be her father. Alex's words jolted Mark awake. Yes, Sarah. Whatever Emily and Jason did, Sarah is innocent. She needs a strong father to protect her and guide her. Mark realizes that even though his marriage may be irretrievably broken, his responsibilities as a father have not changed. He decides that no matter what, he's going to stand up for Sarah and protect her from this storm. With this new resolve, Mark began to re-examine his situation. He knew that there was a tough journey ahead of him. He had to make a lot of tough decisions and face a lot of painful conversations. But now, he had at least found a way forward. The myth of Mark Thompson's perfect marriage has been shattered, but his journey as a father has just begun. With Alex's encouragement, Mark decided to face this difficult situation head-on. He first needs to have an in-depth conversation with Sarah. The 15-year-old has sensed something unusual in the family atmosphere, and Mark knows he can't keep it from her any longer. One Saturday morning, Mark invited Sarah to join him for a walk in a nearby park. In the early morning sunlight, Mark took a deep breath and began this difficult conversation. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you," Mark said softly, "about me and your mom and Uncle Jason." Sarah stopped and turned to Mark with worry and fear in her eyes. Mark explained what had happened as calmly as he could, choosing his words carefully to try to lessen the impact of this harsh truth on Sarah. Sarah was silent for a long time as she listened. Then she suddenly threw herself into Mark's arms and cried bitterly. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I've suspected something was wrong for a long time, but I was afraid to ask. I'm afraid to know the truth." Mark held Sarah close, feeling the tears soaking his shirt. He stroked his daughter's hair and whispered soothingly, "It's not your fault, honey. Never feel guilty about someone else's mistakes." The conversation was painful, but it also brought Mark and Sarah closer together. Sarah says she understands Mark's pain and promises that no matter what happens, she will be on Mark's side. This gave Mark great comfort and strength. Next, Mark had to face an even more difficult task, confronting Emily and Jason. He decided to face both at the same time so as not to collude between them. Mark chose a neutral location, a quiet cafe, to ask Emily and Jason to meet. In the cafe, Mark, Emily, and Jason sit at a corner table. The atmosphere was so tense it could almost cut. Mark looked Emily and Jason straight in the eye, his voice low and firm. "I need to know the whole truth. Don't try to hide or embellish anything." Emily and Jason exchanged a look and then began to tell their story. It turns out that in the 3rd year after Sarah's birth, Emily began to feel anxious about not being able to get pregnant again. Her mother constantly pressured her to have a boy. At a house party, a drunk Jason inadvertently suggests to Emily that if Mark can't get her pregnant, maybe he can. At first, Emily was shocked and revolted by the idea, but as time went on and the pressure mounted, the idea began to linger in her mind. Eventually, in a moment of weakness, she proposes this crazy plan to Jason. Jason, out of sympathy for his sister-in-law and desire for his nephew, agreed. They had planned to do it just once, but when Emily managed to get pregnant, they found themselves unable to stop the relationship. Even after giving birth to the boy and sending him away, they continued the illicit relationship. Mark felt a wave of vertigo as he listened. He couldn't believe that the two people closest to him were capable of such betrayal. Anger, sadness, and a sense of betrayal tumbled through him. "Have you ever thought," Mark said through gritted teeth, "how much your behavior will hurt Sarah? Have you guys ever considered my feelings?" Emily was in tears and Jason had his head down, unable to look Mark in the eye. They both apologized profusely, but Mark knew that a mere apology couldn't make up for the damage they'd caused. Mark stood up and said calmly, "I need time to digest all this. Emily, I would contact an attorney to begin the divorce process. Jason, as of today, you are no longer my brother. As for the boy, I hope I never see him." With that said, Mark turned and left the cafe, leaving Emily and Jason in shock and remorse. The next few months were exceptionally difficult for Mark. The start of the divorce proceedings, separating from Emily, and explaining the situation to family and friends exhausted him every step of the way. But he stuck it out, mostly for Sarah. Sarah showed amazing maturity and understanding in the process. She chose to continue living with Mark, but also visited Emily regularly. Mark never stopped Sarah from connecting with her mother, even though it was an ordeal for him. Jason tried to contact Mark several times to ask for forgiveness, but Mark never responded. He needs time to heal his wounds, and maybe one day he'll be able to forgive Jason, but that day is far away. Over time, Mark slowly began to rebuild his life. He put his energy into his work and received a major promotion. He also began attending a support group for single fathers where he found understanding and support. Most importantly, Mark and Sarah are closer than ever. They often cook together, watch movies, and even start learning new hobbies. Sarah's presence gave Mark the motivation and courage to keep going. However, despite the fact that life is getting on track, Mark's inner wounds are still not fully healed. He knew that there was a long way to go before he could truly let go of the past and accept reality. But now, he at least has the courage and determination to face the future. Mark Thompson's perfect marriage may be a thing of the past, but his journey to growing as a father and a man is just beginning. Time flies, and before you know it, Sarah is 18 years old and about to graduate from high school. Mark and Emily's divorce was finalized a year ago, and while it was a difficult process, it ended peacefully. Over the past 3 years, Mark has slowly rebuilt his life by focusing on his career and raising Sarah. Sarah's graduation became a turning point. Mark sat in the audience and watched with pride and emotion as his daughter walked on stage to receive her diploma and her bachelor's degree. Emily came to the ceremony and sat a few rows away from Mark. It was the first time since the divorce that they had been in the same place at the same time. After the ceremony, Sarah excitedly ran up to Mark and gave him a big hug. "Daddy, we did it!" She cheered. Mark hugged his daughter tightly and felt his eyes water. Just then, Emily came over. She hesitated, then said, "Sarah, honey, congratulations." Sarah turned and hugged her mother, then looked at Mark and Emily and said, "I know this is hard for you, but I'm really happy to see you both here for my graduation." Mark and Emily exchanged an awkward look before Mark whispered, "It's your big day, Sarah. We're all so proud of you." This moment, albeit brief, makes Mark realize that maybe it's time to let go of past grudges. Not for Emily, but for Sarah and for himself. A few days later, Mark worked up the courage to call Jason. It was the first time they had talked in 3 years. Jason on the other end of the phone looked surprised and grateful. "Mark, I don't know what to say," Jason stammered. "I'm so sorry for everything." Mark took a deep breath and said, "Jason, I can't say I've forgiven you, but I think we should talk. Not for you, not for Emily, but for me. I need to let that go and move on." They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe. When they met, both seemed nervous and awkward. Mark asked the question that had been bothering him straight away. "That kid, my nephew, is he okay?" Jason nodded, a flash of sadness in his eyes. "He's fine. I visit him a couple times a year. He doesn't know his true identity, and his foster parents have agreed to keep it a secret." Mark felt a wave of mixed emotions rush over him. That child, both the product of his betrayal and his own nephew. He didn't know if he'd ever be able to come to terms with the boy's existence, but at least Mark felt a twinge of relief knowing he was safe and sound. As the conversation progressed, Mark was surprised to find his anger slowly subsiding. Jason sincerely apologized and explained in detail how tormented in his guilt he had been over the years. Although Mark can't fully forgive Jason, he begins to understand the once close brother. As he left the cafe, Mark felt a big stone in his chest finally fall to the ground. He may never regain his brotherly relationship with Jason, but at least he can let go of his hatred and move on with his life. On the way home, Mark gets a call from Sarah. "Dad, I have great news for you." Sarah said excitedly, "I got accepted to Cornell University." Mark felt a surge of elation. Sarah has always dreamed of attending Cornell, and now her dream has come true. "Awesome, baby," Mark said from the bottom of his heart. "I'm so proud of you. We must celebrate." That night, Mark took Sarah out for a nice dinner. Looking at the happy smile on his daughter's face, Mark felt a peace he had never known before. During the meeting, Sarah suddenly asked, "Dad, are you okay? I mean, about Mom and Uncle Jason? You seem a lot more relaxed than you used to be." Mark smiled at his daughter and said, "You're right, Sarah. I think I'm finally starting to let go. It wasn't easy, but I realized that continuing to resent would only hurt me." Sarah reached out and took Mark's hand in hers, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, Dad. You're stronger than anyone." Mark felt a warmth well up in his heart. He knows that it is because of Sarah's love and support that he is able to get through this difficult time. The next day, Mark worked up the courage to call Emily and tell her the good news that Sarah had been accepted to Cornell. Emily was also happy for her daughter, and they even briefly discussed how they could help Sarah prepare for college. The conversation, though brief, was more peaceful than any other in the last 3 years. In the evening, Mark sits on the balcony of his home and reflects on the changes of the past few years. His marriage ended and his family was torn apart, but he wasn't broken by that. Instead, he became stronger and more appreciative of the things that really matter in life. Sarah is about to fly out of the nest to begin her college experience. Mark knew that this meant a new chapter in his life as well. Maybe it's time to reopen your heart and try secondary romance. Looking at the stars twinkling in the night sky, Mark felt excited about the future for the first time. He knows that the road ahead may still be challenging, but he is ready for new opportunities. Mark Thompson's story moves from a betrayed husband to a strong single father to a middle-aged man ready to start over. This process of transformation was painful, but it also allowed him to grow and appreciate the things that really matter in life. Finally, Mark thought of the nephew he'd never met. Maybe one day, when he's fully let go of the past, he'll choose to get to know the kid. But that's a future thing. For now, he's going to focus on the present, cherish the time he has with Sarah, and look forward to the new life that is to come. Mark closed the balcony door and stepped inside. Tomorrow, a new day was about to begin, and he was ready for all the challenges and opportunities that life brought. Time flies, and before you know it, Sarah is 18 years old and about to graduate from high school. Mark and Emily's divorce was finalized a year ago in a process filled with strife and resentment. For the past 3 years, Mark has tried to focus on his career and raising Sarah, but the hurt inside has never fully healed. Sarah's graduation became a moment of having to face reality. Mark sat in the audience and watched his daughter walk up to the stage in her bachelor's degree to receive her diploma with mixed emotions. Emily came to the ceremony and sat far away from Mark. It was the first time since the divorce that they had been in the same place at the same time. After the ceremony, Sarah excitedly ran up to Mark and gave him a hug. Just then, Emily came over. The atmosphere immediately became tense. "Sarah, honey, congratulations." Emily tried to act as if nothing had happened. Sarah looked awkwardly at both of her parents, then said, "Thanks, Mom. I'm glad you're all here." Mark forced himself to nod grudgingly as he fought back his inner discomfort. He still can't forgive Emily for her betrayal, and every time he sees her, he's reminded of those painful memories. A few days later, Mark received a text from Jason wanting to meet and talk. Mark wanted to refuse, but out of a desire for the truth, he finally agreed. They met at a quiet cafe. Jason looked much more haggard, and Mark noticed the fear and shame in his eyes. "Mark, I know my apology probably means nothing," Jason spoke up, "but I'm really sorry. I regret it every day." Mark interrupted, saying coldly, "Yeah, you should be sorry. You ruined my marriage. You ruined my family. What about the boy? How is he?" Jason lowered his head, his voice trembling. He's not well. Someone found out the truth and spread rumors around the school. He was bullied by the other kids who said he was a bastard. His foster parents also began to treat him coldly. I tried to help him, but..." Mark felt a wave of mixed emotions rush over him. He felt a twinge of sympathy for the innocent child, but more than that, he was angry at Jason and Emily. "Look what you've done," Mark said through gritted teeth. "Not only ruined my life, but the life of an innocent child." Jason nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I know. My reputation is completely ruined. My company made me quit my job, and my friends don't want to hang out with me. I deserved it." Mark sneered. "This is the price of your betrayal. What about Emily? How is she?" Jason said bitterly, "She's not having a good time either. Losing her job alienated her friends, her family. Even her sisters are disappointed in her." Mark felt a flicker of vengeful pleasure, but it was quickly replaced by a deeper sadness. He stood up and gave Jason one last look. "I'll never forgive you guys." You are no longer my brother. Don't contact me again." On the way home, Mark gets a call from Sarah telling him she's been accepted to Cornell. Despite his mixed feelings, Mark is happy for his daughter. That night, Mark and Sarah celebrated with dinner. During the meeting, Sarah carefully asked, "Dad, are you okay? I mean, about Mom and Uncle Jason." Mark sighed and said, "Sarah, I'm not going to lie. It's hard. I may never be able to forgive them, but I don't want this to affect you. You should be proud of your accomplishments." Sarah took Mark's hand and said, "I understand, Dad. I just want you to be happy." Mark forced a smile, but he knew that true happiness might never return. The next day, Emily calls and wants to discuss Sarah's college matters. Mark briefly answered the necessary questions, but declined any further conversation. He could hear the exhaustion and desperation in Emily's voice, but he no longer cared. In the evening, Mark sits on the balcony of his home and reflects on the changes of the past few years. His marriage ended, his family was torn apart, and his trust was shattered. Though he's trying to rebuild his life, the scars inside remain. Sarah is about to fly out of the nest to begin her college experience. Mark knew that this meant a new chapter in his life as well, but he's not sure he'll ever be able to trust people again or have the courage to start a new relationship. Looking at the night sky, Mark felt a pang of loneliness. He knows that the road ahead is still full of challenges. The shadow of betrayal may follow him forever, influencing his every decision. Mark Thompson's story turns from a betrayed husband to a single father trying to be strong. This process of transformation was full of pain and struggle, making him more cautious and more appreciative of the things that really matter in life. Finally, Mark thought of the nephew he'd never met. He felt a twinge of sympathy for what had happened to the innocent child, but more than that, he was helpless and angry at the whole situation. The secret not only destroyed his family, but a child's life as well. Mark closed the balcony door and stepped inside. Tomorrow, a new day is about to begin. While the future is still filled with uncertainty and painful memories, he must move on for Sarah's sake. Life may never go back to the way it was, but he has no choice but to face this harsh reality and rebuild his life amidst the rubble. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.